Do you get bored easily with life and find yourself chasing the next big thing? Do you crave a change of pace or a fresh new view? Filmmaker Barry Walton felt that same restless anxiety often when his life didn't go the way he planned. But instead of giving up, he found a way to turn his restlessness into a tool for reinvention.
I feel like I've become an expert at transformation in my life and reinventing myself in every move that I've ever done. The road trip through Mexico, the sailing trip, the trip across America, the move to Italy, all those moves kind of came with kind of like something new that I wanted to find within myself and within my life interests.
Up next on Reinvention at Any Age, we take you from restlessness to reinvention. How did you end up in this kind of situation? And that changed the whole trajectory of your life. This is my light, and I'm going to let it shine. Even if it's uncomfortable, if the change is for the better, it's worth it. Don't be scared, prepare.
Reinvention is possible. Go make it happen for you today.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Reinvention at Any Age. I'm Amy Sweezy, and I am passionate about helping you navigate through your reinvention. My guest today from an early age learned how to escape. In elementary school, he escaped a learning disability by becoming the class clown. As a teenager, he escaped a near-deadly car accident by making a deal with God. And as a young adult finding his way in Hollywood, he escaped being fired from his dream job by moving to another country. After more than a decade in California producing for TV shows, Barry Walton felt lost with his career direction and lonely in his personal life. So he put his old pattern to work and escaped to Costa Rica to recover and regroup. Little did he know that his escape this time would turn into a reinvention. Barry is now the owner and creative director of Endless Media. He has released 7 documentaries, won an Emmy for his directing work, hosts a podcast of his own, and has authored a brand new book titled The Unknown Adventurer. Please welcome to the podcast, Barry Walton. Hello, thank you for being here.
Amy, how are you? This is so awesome. I love this.
Isn't it fun? Well, so first of all, we need to share with the listeners that we have a little bit of a history. I have known you and your family for, I did the math, nearly 40 years.
Yes, we have. We go all the way back to the small roots in Michigan. And I'll tell you, I think the funnest part of that is seeing kind of your trajectory and all the awesome stuff that you did, because while I was just kind of bouncing around and doing all these, you gave me an amazing intro. You were very focused in the Orlando area and doing some amazing things in news.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. And because I had my own career reinvention, I'm obviously very drawn to others who have done the same thing. You've had several reinventions over the years. We, of course, went to the same high school. You're a little bit younger than me. And we didn't really keep in touch over the years. But recently, thanks to social media, we discovered that we were both now living in Central Florida and were able to reconnect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, social media changed everything, right? I mean, it used to be you heard rumors of what people were doing,
Right.
right? You didn't really know, like so and so went here or so and so lives there, and
Uh-huh.
you'd hear rumors, but now you're like tracking people in moments of their life all throughout it. And you speak of the transformation, you kind of go, well, I knew them then and now they're this way. And it is kind of fascinating how social media has changed a lot of everything. So
For
for
sure. I
sure.
remember hearing, oh, Kevin Walton's little brother Barry, he moved to California and he's working in TV. But now here we are all these years later. I'm so excited because I have your book here too, and I read your book and I can't wait to talk about that as well. But first, I just want to start at the beginning. You go into great detail in your book about your childhood in Michigan, some of the struggles, some of the fun, and you paint such a vivid picture of Midwest living in that big old farmhouse. So just give us a little bit of a rundown, a brief rundown about how struggling to learn in elementary school kind of set you up for what you call a narrative of failure.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's a great question, and that's a great setup. I mean, I think When you're a kid, normal kind of becomes the world as you see it. And what I mean by that is you everyone kind of ends up having their own normal in life. If for some reason you're an overachiever to everyone else, to you, you're just doing what you've always known to do. You just have a gift. You just assume that everyone has that gift, and that's just how life functions. And if only and everyone could do it like you're doing it, they would be where you're at. On the flip side of that, when you're not an overachiever, when you're struggling with things, that's your normal, and you kind of feel like I've kind of been cursed, or I've kind of been that's kind of been cast upon me, and you're doing your best to keep up, and everyone, And I remember, spelling tests or reading out loud in elementary school, and how miserable that experience was from the perspective of I didn't want to be different. When you're struggling with something, you don't want to be different, and you want to kind of feel like you fit in. And so for me, I think the normal began to be kind of like an excuse to kind of to kind of pull an ejection cord. You use the term in the introduction, escape. They call it the victim's mentality, right? And what the victim themselves, and the person who has that mentality, and I know because I was one of them. They don't even realize that they're doing it, but they're falling back on crutches. And for me, those crutches were kind of, giving up early, not going through the fire of something, not sticking things out, but instead kind of being like the cool guy. And for me, it was my ejection cord in the classroom was kind of being the class clown or making jokes. And when that started to fail me, it just kind of been I just kind of played it cool, like, that's not important. Math class isn't important, English class isn't important, hanging out with the guys and playing basketball, that's what's important. But those were mental shifts that kind of like happened within my mind, that what I wanted to be successful. I wanted to keep up with my peers. And when I couldn't, instead of like doubling down and dealing with kind of the struggle and not making excuses, not falling on my crutches, not looking for those people that were always like, "Oh, Barry, Barry's that way. That's just Barry." That gave me the excuses, that gave me the out. And that would create what do they call it? A cycle, where a defeating cycle, where you would return back to where you began and just said, "Well, I just can't do it." And it wasn't until I recognized that and looked at that head on that I began to make that transition that we're talking about.
Well, I know another pivotal point also when you were a kid, a teenager, was when you were in a car accident at 16. And obviously, this is a podcast focused on reinvention. But would you say that some of those early events, the failing the third grade, the being in the car accident, do you feel like those are the things that set you up for your eventual reinvention?
The car accident gave me an acute awareness of how fragile life was at a very young age. So I think the car accident kind of gave a little bit of birth or inspiration to these magnanimous, oversized dreams of I'm going to move to Hollywood and become an actor, with no prior experience. I use the analogy in the book where like I was just jumping off of cliffs of big dreams, unprepared for how to get there. But I think, to your point, that was more catalyst to like the scale of dreams. Um, I think uh, I think what became the process of transforming and overcoming my failure was looking at myself honestly. That's a really hard thing to do. Like,
Right. And did that happen through therapy? Was it something that you just kind of realized on your own after living life for a while? Did it happen while you were writing your book?
I think for me, it occurred after years of failure, after kind of years of big mistakes, and just reaching a place where I wasn't who I wanted to be. I wasn't with who I wanted to be. I wasn't anywhere near any of the goals that I truly dreamed of attaining. Like I kept kind of going, I want that. And then I would go over here. I want that. And then I would go over here. I was so afraid to go for what I wanted. And I had this dream job working for Nat Geo and Animal Planet. And I had this huge failure that occurred during that job. And I kind of talk about it in depth. And I went on a trip down to Costa Rica. And it was during that time that I just really said, what is it that I want in life, and can I stay focused on it and go for it as if the fear that I had been carrying my entire life, the trauma that I'd been carrying my entire life, didn't exist. It just took so many years of just honestly saying, this is who I am, and then being honest about my failure. When I failed, saying, where did I go wrong? Not who cheated me, who stabbed me in the back, who let me down, who was over me pushing, not like this has always happened. I just can't do this. Not the defeating mentality. Like I started my business at 44 years old. It wasn't the time to start a business and take this leap. And there's been so many times when I've wanted to give up, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of money. I'm not going to pay for my mortgage. I don't know where to find my next job. And I'd get on my knees and pray, if I'm completely honest with you. And that's the faith element. I would pray, and I would, God, help me through this. I'm not giving up. I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to go back. I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to trust that it's going to work out. And that shifted my mentality, and things ended up working out, and a new cycle was born, right? Not one built on my past history of all the failures that I knew that I had done, but one built on the idea that like I can overcome failure, and I can make it to the other side, changed.
Obviously, we'll encourage listeners to find your book and read it because there's so many adventures that you talk about in detail, which is fantastic. But, lots of traveling, living on a boat, working in California, hobnobbing with famous people, but also feeling very restless. And sometimes that was your reason for taking some of these trips, that you were always sort of searching for something, looking for more. So when you went on these adventures and you're kind of looking back, do you feel like you went with the intention of regrouping, reinventing yourself? Or do you think it really was just, looking for some fun or maybe a form of escape, a little bit of everything rolled into one?
You need to build in times in life to assess everything that you're doing, to assess your trajectory, to assess where you've been and where you're going. And in that time in my life, I felt like doing that. The best way to do that was to just stop doing everything. And I'm referring to directly the 3 times that I took like prolonged trips of 3 to 6 months, just going on a road trip. And as an adult now with a family, I don't have that luxury. Was it escape? Was it the transformation or kind of looking for a new self? And I think it is definitely a lot of that escape from life. I struggle with the desire to just escape from the constant grind of life and be like, I need some time to like grab onto this thing. It's going by so fast, right? I need some time to experience this and kind of regroup, and take a moment to like figure out where I'm at and where I'm going. And then there was part of me where it was, on definitely on the sailing trip where I was just kind of like, this isn't going the way I want it to go, meaning life and career and relationship. I'm just going to do this completely random thing and leave on a sailboat for 3 months. And on all these occasions, I sold literally everything I had. And all of it was about coming back some different and seeing the world different and moving closer to who I wanted to be. I feel like I've become an expert at transformation in my life and reinventing myself. And I'm also thinking about like in every move that I've ever done, the road trip through Mexico, the sailing trip, the trip across America, the move to Italy, and then recently the move from, New York and then Michigan, and then Michigan to Florida. All those moves kind of came with kind of like something new that I wanted to find within myself and within my life interests, and also just restless anxiety too as an artist that I.
Well, and that brings me to one of your stories as well, which is pretty significant. After kind of the way I read it, basically you were fired from a TV job in California and you end up in Costa Rica. And while you're there, you meet an Italian woman who, by the way, is now your wife. But you decided to move to Italy after meeting her just a couple of weeks. And I feel like a lot of people would have seen that as reckless and crazy. And what are you thinking? So, was your family and friends supportive of this? Did they think you were nuts? Is it part of that pattern of, uh oh, here goes Barry again doing another crazy thing?
Yeah, it was very much part of that pattern. Here goes Barry again doing another crazy thing. Um, it's funny that you say this because the truth of it, Amy, was I think the move to Italy was a little bit of a catharsis. Um, you know, I had done so many crazy things. It was here goes Barry again, another crazy thing. He'll probably fail, come back, return, and lick his wounds. And I got over there and I said, I'm never going back. Not I'm never going back physically. I'm never going back to that person again. Um, I'm done. It was literally the turning point. It was the closing of a chapter of of the person that had taken huge risks and failed, taken huge risks and failed. And of all the things that I've done, the move to Italy was easily one of the hardest things I've ever taken on. I had taken a huge risk with this woman that I had met for a very short period of time. Mind you, I met her in Costa Rica. We met on the beach for like 6 hours. Facebook was just coming of age. I'd gotten her contact. I wrote her. I said, I'll come visit you in Italy. I did. I stayed in Italy for 7 days. And I said, what do you think if I moved here? She thought I was nuts. And I was nuts. And I did. I moved here, and it was a little that escape and that restlessness. And when I got there, I don't know the language. I don't know how to build a career. I basically threw my career away, which had an upward trajectory at the time. It was on an upward trajectory, minus the firing, which was because I was a knucklehead, but I could have recovered from that. And I'm in a new relationship, and the cultural divide is there. And it was fascinating how I was over there just going, what? If I'm completely honest, there's a huge amount of romance in this that people love to, but there was part of me that was like, what in the world at times did I do? I taught English as a second language, and I volunteered on the set of a bunch of films, which I have some amazing stories from films that I did over there and worked on. But the point is that it was at that point that I realized that I'm not ever going to go back. I'm going to go forward from this point. I'm going to accept my mistakes as mine. I'm going to own them. I'm going to accept my failures as mine. They're nobody else's. I'm not going to lean on the crutches. I'm not going to call the people that used to allow me to pull the ejection cord and start over. I'm not going to play the victim. And I think it was the most hardest and most important decision of my life, and it's become who I am today. I'm not, I wouldn't be who I am today had I not stayed in that fire and let it define me. And I've been married now we're coming on our 15 years of marriage. I have a beautiful son, a beautiful wife. She's amazing. She puts up with me because I'm a pain in the butt, but but it was a success story that came from years of failures.
I know you talk about because on paper it does sound so romantic. Oh my goodness, how many people wouldn't love to just move to Italy or another country, move to France or something? They don't have the opportunity. But you talk a lot in the book about how that really changed your view of America by now suddenly you're an Italian immigrant living in another country. How, did it make you more grateful, or did it make you think, oh man, it is truly awesome to live in another country?
I think a little bit of both. Um, it was a great perspective. I was an immigrant, as glamorous as Americans have had it over the years, I was taken advantage of for tax. I was illegal for the first couple of months, first year almost, and my employer definitely took advantage of me financially. I had to go through the entire immigration process. And I was just like, finally, I understand what this immigrant experience is about. I saw the influence of our country on the world differently from over there, both good and bad. Both the kind of the loud American kind of experience. You kind of look around and you go, well, it's kind of true. So it definitely gave me a fond appreciation for America, both good and bad. Every country has their problems, every country has their highs and lows.
And at some point, you end up moving back to the US, eventually make your way to Florida and start your own business. Was that move to Florida a reinvention? Were you trying to create a whole new you?
During COVID, we were in Detroit in the basement, COVID lockdown. We weren't in love with the winter. My wife is from Italy. She wanted to go to warmer weather. Schools were opening. Kids were going back to school. People were allowed to be on the beach. They were kind of ending the lockdown kind of policies in Florida sooner than the rest of the nation. Companies were working virtually. My clients said I could live anywhere. And it all coincided to be a more attractive place, frankly. And I love Michigan. I'm from Michigan. You're from Michigan. Our families are from Michigan. But Florida was definitely a reinvention. I love it down here. It's just another kind of chapter of the adventure of life. I mean, it keeps life exciting. And now we've been down here for 5 years, and we're very happy.
The career that you have now, it's kind of the same general field is what you've done all along in California, kind of back and forth, the producing, the directing, working in media fields. So how would you, with your business now in media and working on documentaries, how would you compare today to those early days and then conclude that, yeah, I've kind of reinvented my life and my career?
Well, it's funny that you say that. I think that what the reinvention in my career would be more of a fulfillment of what I always envisioned it to be. When I first walked on a set in Hollywood, I used to work with Matthew Ralston. Matthew Ralston was a famous photographer and director for GQ and some of the biggest fashion magazines in America. Think The Devil Wears Prada. He was like a version of that in Hollywood. I was actually Matthew Ralston's personal assistant for a long time, and I would run around on set with his director's chair, and I would move it from one set to the other, and I would drop him off at home or go pick him up things. But the point of that was, I said, I want to be a director. I want to direct my own things. I said the only way that I'm going to be a director is if I begin to call myself a director. I made several documentaries, one in Hawaii, and then my book talks about the one that I made in the Himalayas, and then the one that I was alluding to with the trip across America became Empty America, a documentary that I made. And for years, I was just slowly building those pieces. And in this kind of period in my life, I've kind of arrived to that place that I'd always envisioned myself being.
You shared a little bit about how your perspective on life has changed since those early days in Michigan when we were growing up. What would you now go back and say to 20-year-old Barry if you could?
I would repeat the words of my now 86-year-old mentor and friend, Karen Lewis, who is also my hairstylist. And Karen says, Barry, the one thing you need to work on is being patient. Being patient. And what I would say to myself at 25 or at any point when I was just ridden with anxiety and wanted to make life happen and felt like it wasn't happening for me and didn't know how to make it happen was be patient. Be patient. And even today, I have to be patient. I believe that God has a course for everyone. And I believe that there is something divine to this life that's bigger than who we are. And we can do our part, but then we have to be patient.
We've talked a lot about the book. You've now reinvented yourself into an author, which, by the way, is pretty amazing that a kid who struggled in school now has written a book. So tell me a little bit about the book, The Unknown Adventure. How did it come about? The process? Did you self publish?
It's funny that you asked that question. A kid who struggled in school. The funniest thing is I've always dreamed of writing a book, and I think I was always fascinated by authors because I was like, how did they put all of that information in sequence? And for years, I attempted. And in fact, on this occasion, this was an 8-year process. I wrote it with others in mind. I wrote it with the hope that people could read this and not only learn about me, but learn about themselves and look at themselves honestly, and go for what they want and use me as an example, as a guy. Like, I'm so horrible at school. I didn't read. I can honestly tell you that I graduated college without reading a book end to end. That's embarrassing. It wasn't until I was like 26 living on a sailboat that I finally read a book end to end. And then I went on to read Ayn Rand's books and like huge novels that are just like, I just fell in love with reading, but it wasn't until I got out of school. But the point is I'm an example that you can overcome your struggles. And I know there are people that are much bigger struggles than mine. Mine are internal. They're in my head. They're, disabilities at some level, whatever you might want to call them. I hate even saying it, but just to associate it for people that are struggling with things, physical, mental, whatever, that you can overcome those. You don't have to lean on them.
Well, you share some very personal details in the book, not just about yourself, but about your family too. Your grandma had an affair and grandpa nearly killed the guy. And there was some confusion over an unwanted sexual advance when you were in Hollywood. How did you decide to, add these stories, be so vulnerable? And did you ask people's permission before you talked about them in the book?
I got Me Too'd, and that's kind of the Hollywood thing. I guess the process came from years of storytelling and recognizing that the stories that people are most interested in are the stories that are the most honest. And I felt like if I was going to tell my story, I needed to just be honest about exactly who I am and what I had gone through. I didn't ask a lot of people. I did kind of share it with certain people along the way to kind of see their response and get feedback. I was cautious on names on some occasions so that I didn't completely put people out there that maybe didn't want to be put out there. And I knew that I wasn't going to be fair to my audience if I wasn't willing to tell every detail, as uncomfortable as some of them may be. And, for me, to be completely honest with you, the Hollywood portion of my story is probably the most uncomfortable story that I could tell. And it was a hard story to work through for a very long time. But it was cathartic. I think all of this was very cathartic. I feel a little happier, a little less burdened by the past. It's fascinating when you work through it, when you're writing it emotionally, you relive a lot of this. I would call people up out of the blue and be like, dude, I'm so sorry for X, Y, and Z. I wish I hadn't done that. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's been like 15 years since that happened.
So, what is your best advice to other business owners who want to reinvent themselves?
I think it's a little bit of everything that I've already kind of laid out here. There's two sides of this. I'm probably not the best person to come to for being a great business entrepreneur. And that's me looking at myself, honestly. And I had to find people and connect myself up and match myself up with people that are, and that's still a process. So I think looking at yourself honestly when you're in business, knowing what your purpose is in business. I run into business people who got it. They weren't clear up front on their purpose. The work bogs them down so much, or it's so or it becomes just like a source of making money, and they forget kind of like their contribution, and so they're just kind of like take and not giving back. I think finding time in your life for things that are outside of business, the balance is probably the hardest piece of this for me. I've got a son now. He's 11. It's so important to me that I'm not completely losing track on this and spending all my time on this and missing his entire childhood. Just finding ways to integrate life into the hectic schedule and the busyness of it, I think would be, some of the biggest takeaways from me over the years. And it's hard. It's hard. There's no other way to put it.
Well, Barry Walton, thank you for being here, being a guest on my podcast. If people want to know more about you, where can they find you or follow you?
The website, Endless Media Me, or Endless Media One, those are separate .coms, but they both will take you to the same place. Endless Media Me is probably the easiest one to remember. And you can go there and see our work as a production company, the services we provide, but you can also find my blog there where I write. You can purchase my book there. You can see the 7 documentaries that I've made, and those will take you to all the links to Amazon Prime, where you can order and watch those documentaries and see some of my work.
All right, fantastic. I have the Unknown Adventure here. I need your signature on it next time I see you.
I'm gonna. This is so, yeah, and I'm definitely gonna. And this is so awesome. It's mutual. I'm so appreciative that you've taken the time out and you've brought me on. Such an honor.
Absolutely. Well, I know your story in reinvention is going to inspire so many others. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's awesome.
So what about you? Were you inspired by Barry's story? Everyone navigates life differently. Some stay in the same job, relationship, or routine for years, finding comfort in the stability. Others feel a restlessness, always searching for more or feeling that constant pull for change. Some cut and run so often it could be seen as avoiding responsibility. No matter where you land on this spectrum, do you feel an urge to reinvent yourself? Do you have a desire to create a whole new you? You can stay stuck in the past, make excuses, avoid responsibility, let other people define your story, or you can channel your restlessness into fuel for transformation. Whether it's a one-time change or multiple reinventions, creating a new normal can happen at any time and at any age. Whether you want to reinvent yourself or you have to reinvent yourself, remember, reinvention is possible. Go make it happen for you today.